Hello from the Taylors once again. I trust you are well and taking care during the continuation of our fight with COVID-19. Hopefully we will be able to gather together again in our churches sometime during the month of June. In the interim, continue to participate in the Sunday services and the Wednesday devotional online, and continue to pray for one another. Today I'd like to follow up on the theme that we spoke about 2 Wednesdays ago, but I'd like to do it in less than half the time. That was a long one. To jog your memory, we spoke about the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, focusing on the tax collector's plea, God, make an atonement for me. We presented the idea that not only atonement, but every aspect of life is a gift, grace from God. Today, we think about our response to this gift. What does God require or want from us as He gave us this gift in return for this gift? Indeed, if all of life is a gift from God, should God require anything in return? Or if it's a gift, do we owe anything to God for this gift? We did mention receiving this gift with joy, thanksgiving, and praise or worship. I suggest that these three comprise the sum total of what God requires, or what we owe, or what God wants in response for the gift of grace in all our lives. I would further today like to focus on the third word, worship, and to do so for a few moments using the text as our base found in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Hear the text. Therefore, I encourage you, brothers and sisters, through God's mercies, to present your bodies as a sacrifice, living, holy, acceptable to God. That is your reasonable worship. And do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed through the renewal of your mindset, so that you may discern what is God's will, the good and acceptable and fully mature. This text is so familiar that I suspect we have no idea today how radical and strange it was and is. With these words, Paul begins an entire new section of his gospel, of his letter to the Romans. He finished in chapters 9 through 11 talking about the place of both the Jew and the Gentile in God's economy of grace, of salvation. In chapter 12, verse 1, through chapter 15, verse 13, Paul speaks of the practical outworking of the economy of God's grace for both the Jewish believer and the Gentile believer. In other words, Christian ethics. And the words we read, and we just finished reading, in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, introduce this new section and set the framework for interpretation of this section. So what do they say about how you and I respond in practice to grace, to gift? How is grace both the basis and the framework for our lives? First, in these verses, Paul tells us to present our bodies as a sacrifice to God. Though Paul can use the Greek word soma, body, to refer strictly to the physical body, here he enlarges that meaning not to refer only to the physical body, but to refer properly to your whole self. Your body as your whole self. So we can legitimately translate this verse to say, present your whole self to God as a sacrifice. Your whole self. In other words, here soma, body, encompasses our actual bodies, our wills, our motivations, our intentions, our words, our actions, the totality of who we are every day. Thus, Paul says, present the totality of who you are in all of your living to God as a sacrifice. To us, he would say the very same thing that he said to the Christians in Rome. Everybody in ancient Rome, Jew and Gentile, knew about sacrifice. Every religion I'm aware of in ancient Rome practiced some type of sacrifice. They sacrificed for various things: good fortune, a good marriage, a successful job, good children, mostly boys. And they sacrificed for people as well, especially the emperor on his birthday. They offered plant and animal sacrifices to the gods to get their favor, and to goddesses to attain their favor. In order to attain favor, grace from them. Paul says to us, we are to sacrifice. And he said to the ancient Roman churches, you are to sacrifice, as the Jews did very often, not to attain the favor and grace of God, but in response to the favor and the grace of God. And our lives are to be sacrifices of thanksgiving and praise and worship to God. Paul calls our lives sacrifices that are holy, living, and acceptable to God. That's all God wants. That's all God requires. Well, it sounds fairly easy peasy, doesn't it? One could only wish that were true. Yet, it is possible to lead this type of sacrificial life. This life that is a sacrifice to God. Our total selves as a sacrifice to God. Paul says, don't conform to the mindset of this world. This mindset leads to a set of ethics that is dead, unholy, and unacceptable. We can read the news, we can watch the news, we can look around and see this happening every day, all around us, throughout the world. Ethics that lead to death, that are unholy, not holy, and that are certainly unacceptable to God. Rather, Paul says, let God transform or renew your mindset, your worldview. I had a philosopher of religion in seminary that called it your blick. He was English. Your mindset, how you view the world. Let God transform it, renew it, so that your mindset, so that your ethics from your mindset that grow out of your mindset will be holy and alive and acceptable to God. And it's certainly not that God doesn't want to do the transforming. God does. Our role is to trust, really trust, fully trust God to do it. If we give ourselves to trust, over to trust in God, God will indeed transform our mindset, and we will be able to discern and know and do the will of God. God can grow us into this mindset, not overnight. It's not magic, but God can grow us into this mindset, and we can present lives of sacrifice to God that are good, acceptable, and mature. The future with God is always one of hope. Only trust. Paul says earlier in Romans, the righteous one will live out of trust. Out of trust. God is able to do more in us and with us than we can ever imagine if we let go and we trust God. Well, Paul said, your sacrifice of your life, of your daily living, is our reasonable worship. Reasonable worship. We are so accustomed to thinking about worship as something that happens when we gather together, maybe on Sunday, maybe on Wednesday, in a particular place at a particular time, and practice a liturgy. Paul says our living out our lives every day is our worship. At home, in the restaurant, at the park, on vacation, at school, at the workplace. These are the places, Paul says, that authentic worship of God takes place. And as Paul says, those who experience the grace of at-one-ment with God in Jesus Christ, for this worship is our reasonable response to grace, to Jesus Christ. May God bless you and keep you.